All right, how's everyone doing? I know it's been a bit of a long day and it's also kind of gloomy out. I was hoping for a little bit of sun, but autumn and winter are inevitably around the corner here. And we are so fortunate today to have Heidi with us. Also, I'll share kind of an interesting fun fact here, which is that I've seen Heidi speak on 3 other occasions, oftentimes in rooms packed with thousands of people. So for me to have an opportunity to be face to face here and have this conversation, I'm incredibly fortunate, and every single one of those panels and events that I've heard Heidi speak at, I've walked away with an entire page full of notes. So definitely keep your notebooks out because there's going to be a lot of fun stuff unveiled here. So I'm going to just dive into a bit of an introduction to Heidi, but I want her to take the stage in terms of telling you all about her areas of passions and interests. But Heidi currently today is a senior leader at Adobe, where she leads product-led growth, and she's managed product teams across a variety of really exciting blue chip technology, as well as other types of companies, such as Typeform, such as GoDaddy, and many, many others. And as the moderator today alluded to as well, she's also an entrepreneur. So she's really got this rich background of experiences across diverse industries and has really led product at the helm of all of those. So with that, Heidi, let me pass it over to you.
All right. Where would you like to start?
Let's start with, what are you up to today? And then also use that as the ending point for what was the career path within product that led you to this point?
Yeah, I'll tell you where I'm at and a little bit about my story. So I'm 5 weeks in at Adobe, quite new there, and apparently it's a $13 billion company, 40 years old, which is interesting, right? The product I'm working on, I'm in the document cloud business, which is really Acrobat, which PDFs, right? Sure, we've all seen PDFs. There are 100 million active users a day, which for me was just really exciting as a growth person, right? To have that scale to be able to work on. And it's global, right? I mean, almost everyone on the planet, we have 2 billion users at Adobe, right? And so sort of that global scale is both exciting and also really challenging from a product management standpoint, and particularly this topic around generating insights and understanding where your opportunities are. Because it's so huge. It's like, where do I start? Oh my gosh, who's our user? Everybody, right? What are our use cases? Everything. And it's also fascinating to me that a 40-year-old business with a 30-year-old technology PDF is still growing so quickly. So our business is still growing 25% year over year, which for a big company is insane. Yeah. So that all is exciting, and a lot of what I'm working on right now, as still ramping up there, is making sure that I understand the product strategy, which is where we're trying to go in the next few years, trying to align our financial forecasts and our budget, and for me, most importantly, our people, our teams, to deliver that strategy. So I'm explaining to my product teams, like, your job is to deliver that strategy. And that what they're hearing is, oh my God, there's going to be another reorg, which we could talk about. So that's really what I'm focused on today. And over the last 25 years in tech, my career has evolved from, started out as an engineer. So I'll go back to that for a minute. So I studied materials science and engineering at MIT, and I graduated in '92, which is probably before most of you were born. And then did a master's in '93, and I had always wanted to be an engineer because I wanted to build things. And at the time, and I was like the most naive person ever in terms of like what any of that meant, I was like, I want to build rocket ships and bridges, right? I want to build stuff. And went to MIT thinking like, okay, I'm going to study aeroastro and like build rocket ships. And fairly quickly realized that it was all a lot more complicated than I realized. I didn't understand the business side of things at all. Started studying engineering. As I said, I did my engineering degrees, ended up working on nuclear submarines instead of rocket ships for a few years. And then after spending a year optimizing the level of rare earth metals in base material for a particular weld on a particular nuclear submarine, decided that this is not actually what I wanted to do with my life. I managed to get a job at a management consulting firm in Palo Alto, and so packed up my little beater car and drove across the country and showed up at this little management consulting firm in Palo Alto. And it did what I'd hoped, which was expose me to a lot more of the world. So expose me to businesses of different sizes and start understanding how technology and engineering and business all moves together. And also sort of the importance of people in all this, which is something that I didn't really learn in school. And I'm pleased to see that all of you really are starting to learn a lot more about, like, why are you building these things? Why are you studying these things? Because it was all, you know, a little bit mysterious for me. I then sort of followed that career, you know, this new sort of view of the world into software, and I've really built my career within software since then. With a 5-year hiatus where I, after 2008, when the economy fell apart, which it may or may not do again fairly soon here, we'll see. So I decided after that, I'd been working for like 18 years straight. I'd never taken more than 2 weeks off. I was burnt out. I was sick of staring at a computer screen and wanted to own my own business, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I had a very strange hobby, which was competing in grilled cheese sandwich competitions. Totally serious. Everyone needs a hobby. That was mine. I had won. I have the dubious distinction. I believe I've won more grilled cheese sandwich competitions than anyone on the planet, to the best of my knowledge. Yeah. So I went pro and opened a grilled cheese sandwich restaurant. Along the way, and I realized I had free time. I was unemployed because the startup I was at had exploded. You know, there's a lot were going on at the time. I ended up taking classes at a nonprofit called the Renaissance Center, which is a Bay Area nonprofit that provides entrepreneurship training to underserved communities. So targeting women and minorities, and so they have campuses actually in the Bayview, San Francisco, in Richmond, in East Palo Alto, and they're really recruiting people that want to start businesses. Generally, it's sort of Main Street kind of businesses, so restaurants and the hair salons and you know, those sort of Main Street business, not high tech. So really specializing in that kind of business. But I took classes there, loved it, wrote my business plan, opened my restaurant. It was all bootstrapped. No one was giving out money for anything at that point. And it was a success. And it was great. We grew to 3 units. We started franchising and that kind of stuff. I realized along the way that about 5 years in, that I really missed tech for a number of reasons. Building a restaurant is really fun. Running a restaurant is really tedious. If anyone needs to be talked out of opening a restaurant, you find me afterwards. It's really fun. Like, people are like, I love to cook. I should open a restaurant. You're not cooking in a restaurant. You're managing staff, and you know, or breaking down 50 pounds of onions at a time, which is not really that much fun. So I started kind of dreaming about getting back into tech, and I had also started teaching at the Renaissance Center. So I'd been recruited after taking the classes. Back into teaching. So I taught small business finance. I've coached hundreds of small businesses, reviewing their business plans and giving them feedback, and taught some marketing and things like that. So I'm still super involved in that. That was 2013. I'm now on the board of Renaissance Center, and I still do a ton of coaching and things like that. And so I really fell in love with small business along the way. And I realized that this intersection of my passion for small business and just wanting to live in a world where entrepreneurs can start a restaurant and start these small businesses that do these different things. Like, I want to live in that world, not one where Google and Amazon, you know, control everything. They have their roles to play. I have no problem with those companies. I work for a big company like that. But I want to support people pursuing their passions, and so I realized that what I wanted to do with my career after the restaurant was really enable that. And I was able to sort of leverage my restaurant experience to get back into tech, initially building products for restaurants, so software for restaurants. And then generalized out to small business from there. So I've really focused on building products for small businesses in the last 10 years since then. That's kind of a long-winded career path. And talking a little bit about product management, so I have really focused in product management as my role within that sort of building products. And I believe that product management is the center of the universe because, of course, I'm a product manager. And a lot of the role of product management in building products is really, you've got engineering, you've got design, you've got finance people, there's all these other roles that everyone has, and you're sort of the center of that, of bringing those skills together in the service of delivering something for your customer. So one of the most important things you need to do is understand your customer. Kind of full circle back to the topic of insights.
Yeah, it's a really great full circle there. And that's really the key theme of today's panel, which is product insights and how that's really changed, especially given some of the rather large changes in our workplace driven by the pandemic, driven by remote work, driven by distributed workplaces. There's a lot to consider here, but even before we dive into that, Heidi, could you tell us a little bit about how we should think about defining product insights? Like what are they? Are they customer feedback points? Is it big data? Like how should we understand product insights?
Yeah, that's a great question. Product insights can kind of come from anywhere. There's a few general categories, like when I'm at a company and we're talking about product insights, there's a few categories that I'll go to that we look at, and then you try to bring them together. Roughly what those are, you can have your data-driven insights, which is you might, particularly at a larger company like Adobe, I mentioned I've got 100 million active users, right? So I can look at those journeys and get some insights about, okay, where are their drop-offs, right? What's working, kind of what's not, where do people bail out, and that might give me an insight. An insight is just like, something that makes you go, Insights can come from just talking to your customers, right? So Amelia gave some fantastic examples about gathering insights, just going and interviewing people. People love to talk about themselves. So you will be surprised how far you can get by just asking people about themselves. And really their needs as customers is talking about themselves. So customer interviews, which can be either sort of qualitative or quantitative. So surveying, of course, is one way to do it. If you want to kind of talk to a lot of people and get very sort of high-level kinds of insights, a survey could be helpful. One-on-one interviews, there's all these sort of normal sort of tricks that I'm sure all of you have heard about as far as sort of how you talk to people. How I like to do it, I like to start, if my goal is like, okay, I want to talk to some customers, get inside their head, and just understand, like, what are their unmet needs? What's working for them? What's not, I'll do what I'll call fishing expedition interviews. So try to get 10 people, have a broad-ranging interview. You draft a guide of questions you want to ask them, but then let them take the baton. Try to just get people talking, right? And let them go where they want to go. And half of those are going to be useful and half of them are not. But kind of keep your eyes open and be like, what are they saying that might be new and different, or where are they confirming something I've already heard? So talking to your customers is super critical. Understanding your data is super critical. Bringing those things together is even better, right? So you might talk to a customer, have some insight where they're like, yeah, I hate this thing, right? And if you can confirm in the data how important that is, then now you've got like something really powerful. Competitors are a great source of insights. So both sort of direct and indirect, right? So who's doing something like you, and make sure you pay attention to those competitors. What are they doing right? Sometimes you can see white space if you look at your competitors, and sometimes what they're doing is like, well, I should just do what they're doing, you know? Not the core product idea, but like, hey, they've solved this little problem over here. Why reinvent the wheel? Like, I'm just gonna copy what they're doing, that's fine. Kind of a couple other sort of under-resourced or under-leveraged sources of insights can be like third-party reviews. So you can look at your own or your competitors' reviews on whatever review kind of sites might be out there. So for software, there's things like, there's a bunch of sort of software review sites that are fairly common. A lot of companies don't pay attention to those things. If you think about like App Store, right? So all of you have apps on your phones, right? So the reviews that all of you may or may not be leaving on the App Store, those are gold, right? So that could be a great source of insights. The insights, again, are all these things that just make you go, huh, that's weird. Now your next challenge, once you kind of got these insights, is to verify, are they a big enough problem to pay attention to? Is this worth solving? That can be equally difficult to kind of sort out, right? Ideally, you can go back to your data and take this insight, like, okay, customers can't do this thing, marry it up in some way with data to validate whether or not it's important. If you're a bigger company like Adobe, you know, we're drowning in data, there's usually some way to do that. If you're a startup, like the last couple panelists, where you don't really have that data, you might just need to use some heuristics, right, and use some common sense. And in fact, with big companies, you do that too. Of just like, well, what portion, you know, who's my audience? What portion of my audience do I think could be having this problem? And then kind of like, how severe is this problem for them? Is it a minor inconvenience? Is it like a really big deal? And so you can start kind of bucketing your insights, you know, using some common sense and narrowing down to the things you want to focus on. Because really the point of getting insights is to help you build your backlog, build your roadmap of the stuff you're going to work on. You know, so narrowing down like where are you going to focus your efforts and your resources and what to do next.
Thank you for sharing so many resources of insights. And so a follow-up question here would be, it sounds like you just named a dozen, literally, off the top of your head there, and I'm sure there's a lot more that the team would pay attention to. How does a product manager, a person in product, strike the line between being data-driven and chasing down all of those individual insight paths to being driven by product vision, which is you know where you want to go, maybe the customers aren't asking for this yet, and you have this strong, let's say, gut feeling or intuition that a customer may not know exactly what it is that is wrong with their experience today, but you know that you can solve those problems. Tell us a little bit about how does someone reconcile that, and specifically in the role of products, how do you take care of that, either operationally? Is there a specific framework? Like how have you done that in the past?
Oh, that's so hard. Product vision, kind of your longer term product vision and product strategy, that is kind of faith, right? So yes, you can base it in your market research and your customer interviews and build your confidence that this is the right vision, but there's an element of it that always is sort of faith and belief, right? And I'll say you can't A/B test a strategy as well. I've had, we're in growth, and a lot of people think that all we do is A/B test things. That's not true. So seeing that place where you want to go 2-3 years from now. I'm not trying to answer the question.
It's a trick question.
There's no answer. There is no answer. That's true. You definitely want to understand as kind of the product person, usually the company strategy and company and product vision is usually something a little bigger than you. You're one of a collection of people that are bringing this thing to life. As the product manager, you may control what engineers work on and what designers design, right? So you end up having a lot of control over like what work actually gets done. And so I'll say you have a responsibility to deliver on the needs that you can identify today, deliver like incremental improvement with the product you have today, and try to invest in that future. That's one of the hardest things I find about building a product strategy, a product portfolio, or a work portfolio, is trying to build this, trying to balance those things. Taking those bigger risks farther out, investing in that vision, while at the same time delivering on these higher confidence things where someone's told you, I need this thing, you know, especially if you're in sort of B2B enterprise kind of business, like you're gonna have these very vocal customers, they're just gonna tell you what they want, right? And it's real easy to get caught up on just like delivering the stuff that they tell you they want. And then find yourself with no vision at all, and find yourself with this product that's just a giant pile of features and increasingly difficult to use.
That's an interesting point at the tail end there, which is oftentimes when we're just looking at distinctive data points, maybe we're more along the lines of trying to fix or build specific features versus a product manager's role is to holistically build a product vision. And so I think that's a really interesting point to consider there. A follow-up to that conversation would be thinking about what are some of the perhaps common pitfalls, or where does data and where do some of these insights point us wrong sometimes? Like, what are situations that either you've seen, or what are some things that we should be cautious of as we're pulling our own insights for our own entrepreneurial projects, the problems that we're trying to solve in our day-to-day jobs and lives?
Yeah, I want to plus one a comment that you made quickly in there. Which, oh my gosh, I just blanked on what it was. But the idea that you're sorting through this giant pile of potential insights and directions you can go. And when you're doing product, you also have a million competing stakeholders who are all trying to get your attention and get you to work on their thing. You may or may not have a bunch of vocal customers demanding stuff, and you have to somehow prioritize all of this. So a few pitfalls. One pitfall is peanut buttering, which is trying to do everything. If I just take my capacity and roll each of these things a little bit, right? If I do a little bit of everything, then somehow it'll all work. That generally is a dead end, because now you've done a lot of things sort of poorly, and haven't really committed to anything. And no one can tell what your strategy is, and no one knows who your product is for. Like, that's usually, it's tempting, it's really hard not to do it, but that's usually a mistake. Another one that I see a lot, particularly with sort of people new to product, is not realizing that you are not the customer. Even if on paper you sort of are the customer. So like, even when I, as a restaurant, former restaurant owner, was designing software for restaurant owners, I had to be very cognizant that I am not the customer. Yes, I'm a restaurant owner, but the average restaurant owner doesn't have 15 years experience in product management, right? So, important to keep in mind. And I see this a lot in the Valley, where product managers and designers and engineers will design products for what they imagine the customer is, rather than who these people really are. So really understanding how your product fits into their lives, and what problem you're really solving. That was the plus one, was identify the problem that you're solving, is critical. And to do that, I recommend a big dose of humility. It's easy for, I think, also people to kind of get in this, you get it caught up in sort of the culture of Silicon Valley, and like, we're the smartest people in the world, and I went to Berkeley, and it's a great school, and all that's true. But you don't know what you don't know. And so a big dose of humility and curiosity. Your job is to understand these people and how you can make their lives better. And sometimes the answer is they don't want to spend their time using your software at all. So your goal is to actually minimize the amount of time they have to spend using your stuff. I don't want to spend my time doing my taxes, right? That's awful. I want it to just magically get done, and I don't have to worry about it, right? So a lot of people imagine, a lot of product managers like to think that their product is so important, and their goal is to get more and more people to want to spend more time in their product. That may not actually be the case. So understanding really the role that you play in their lives, and the larger context of their lives, be that their business life or their personal life or their family life, or sort of whatever aspect of their lives it is that your product is involved in, is important.
Heidi, I think that's a really great point, and it sounds kind of obvious, but I'll restate my understanding of it as well, which is a lot of folks in the room here are really interested in being entrepreneurs, or are already down that path. And oftentimes those ideas come from you having a problem that you're trying to solve for yourself. So your starting point or your origin is, I am solving a problem that I understand, I am the customer. But at some point, once you start to need to recruit customers beyond yourself, those needs change, and you have to take the time to understand that you have to realize that your intuition or the insights you have around your problem may not scale out beyond just yourself. And so I think that's where this comes back to some of the sources that Heidi was mentioning. One of the places to start is that fishing expedition. You have to go out and understand, what are people just saying? And you may start to understand these avenues of questions that you didn't ask yourself when you were solving this problem just for you alone. So I think that's a really golden piece of advice there. So we're almost at time here. We have about 5 minutes. We were originally also thinking about opening up for a question or two at the end, but when Heidi actually stepped into the conference hall today, several individuals had questions around, what are the skills to build to become a product manager or to even contemplate a career in product? And so I think that's a really interesting question because, as Heidi alluded to, a product manager is often at the center of a universe. A universe is really large, a lot of skills. You can imagine a lot of potential things that you could be learning to be good at that. Heidi, what is your take on that? If you're in the audience today and you're studying and you're interested in having a career in product, what sort of classes should you take? What should you major in? Tell us the secrets.
Well, I came into it pretty sideways. So, and there was no such thing as like a product manager when I did it either. And it's only fairly recently that there was even the opportunity to kind of go straight into product management from college. It's kind of always been something where you start out as an engineer, designer, or marketer, or something else, and then you sort of move into product. So it's exciting for me to see this become really its own discipline. One of the things that's a little bit challenging about it is the ambiguity. It's also, I'll say, one of the things for me that's the most fun about it, right, is oftentimes with product managers, when they're just a little bit like, when they don't know what to do next, I'll give them the advice of just make yourself useful. So, find something and be useful. And it could be, and part of what's fun about the job is you get to do so many different things. So this week, I worked on building a budget, multi-million-dollar budget, right? Which is a good skill to have, like not my, like that's all I had to do all day, like that is not what I would want to do. I interviewed some customers to try to understand, what's working and not with our software. I spent some time digging around in data funnels to understand, like, okay, these million people come to this landing page, and where do they drop off from there? And trying to get some insights about, like, okay, how can we improve this thing? I spent some time with designers, coming up with, like, what if we built this whole new onboarding experience, right? So you get to do this variety of things, and so it's a role that doesn't have a lot of boundaries. So I would say, if you're interested in product, first ask yourself, are you comfortable with ambiguity? Is that exciting for you or not? And I would say that kind of comes back to your personality. So if you're someone who likes to have like color within the lines and you want it to be really clear what your expectations are, this might not be the best job for you. Also that variety. So there's these sort of core product skills that you should be good enough at, competent enough at, and that would be some amount of data fluency and data literacy. You don't need to be an expert, but you gotta have enough. Enough understanding of the technology. You don't need to be an engineer, but you at least need to have some understanding of kind of how this stuff works. Empathy for your customers, so an ability to sort of articulate your customers' needs, talk to them, right? Get them into a conversation and be drawing insights out of them. That's important. There's a certain amount of salesmanship that you need to have because you are generally the representative of your team and your function or your area, and you need to kind of sell that to the rest of the organization because you're competing for resources, you're competing for attention, right? So recognizing that you're a bit of a salesperson. Design, marketing, understanding some marketing, these are all kind of core product skills. I would recommend though, so you want to, if you're starting out, get broad experience across those things. Start with any one of them, if you kind of start somewhere, and then try to get experience across them all. over time, over the first couple of years, you want to start understanding which of these things are my favorite things. What's the stuff that I love? When I'm interviewing product managers, particularly for more mid-level, I ask them, what's the stuff you love? You wake up and you're like, sweet, I get to interview customers today. Or like, sweet, I get to dig around in the data today. Like, what is it? That is probably the stuff that you're best at. Go deep in that. You know, you're competent here, but there's this sort of T model that I'm waving my hands around showing, where you're competent in a bunch of things, but you go deep in something. And that should be a particular skill, and or it could also be a particular subject matter expert. So like, for me, small business and restaurants. Like, I understand more about that business than the vast majority of people who design software for restaurants. So I'm kind of a subject matter expert there. So developing some expertise will serve you well, because that then becomes something that you can grow into a bigger thing.
So there we have it. Heidi just gave us the secret. The answer here is to think about a T-shaped career development or skills development process for yourself. So you start building generalist skills, and then you pick a superpower that you begin to hone in on, and then ultimately in that interview, if you're meeting with Heidi or any others, if they ask you what is your superpower, you'd be able to demonstrate that with those examples and being able to articulate that story. So that's all the time we have. Unfortunately, we ran out of time for questions. Heidi, if individuals are interested in connecting with you or seeing what you're up to, what's the best place for them to go?
Probably like everyone has said, please find me on LinkedIn, Heidi Gibson. At Adobe, I should be pretty easy to find. Feel free to hit me up. I do regularly do calls with people and talk about various topics. So, you know, I'd be happy to spend half an hour talking about some particular topic if you're curious.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Heidi, for joining us. We learned so much today.